Well, across Iran, Christians have been singled out by the evil Ayatollah and his regime for their so-called complicity with Zionism. And indeed, many Iranian Christians are being persecuted, and there's a ramping up of attacks, atrocities against the Christian community in Iran because of their perceived Zionist collaboration. A very interesting element, and one that is not shocking, as even in the United Kingdom, Iranian expats and refugees are some of the most active and vocal supporters of the idea of the nation state of Israel, including and particularly those who've come to faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. But this is a problem that's seen throughout the Middle East, and we're going to be hearing a little perspective on what's going on around the Middle East as a whole and how we can be praying into the situation faced by the persecuted church there. I'm Reagan King, and joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Alistair Scott.
It's great to be here specifically talking about Iran because it's very much in the news at the moment over the last few weeks with the whole Israel conflict. And it's important for us to understand that, you know, I do hear the stories, I know you hear the stories of the fastest growing church in the world at the moment is in Iran, but it's very much underground. It's not like there's a freedom for the evangelical churches to speak in the streets, but people are just getting radically saved. And alongside churches underground growing, and I mean, I've heard the number 1 million people now are believers within Iran, which is shocking in a way when you think of the amount of persecution that goes on against anything that's to do with Christianity, and as you said, specifically anything that agrees with siding with Israel, because Israel is the number one enemy of Iran. But amongst the good things, there is also the great persecution going on too. And we had this interview a few weeks ago, covering many subjects around the Middle East nations, and with my friend Jamal Lidawi, who's works mainly in Kurdistan, but I mean he was born in Jordan, has worked in Egypt, and actually got radically saved during the Iraq-Iran war. So let's have a listen to this generally about the Middle East, but I know he talks about Iran and the things that have gone on in Syria recently too. Thank you so much, Jamal, for joining us. We're looking at a persecuted church, the Christians in persecution around the world, but particularly now we are focusing on the Middle East. I know your main focus of work, ministry-wise, is Kurdistan, but with the recent developments, the conflicts that have been going on with Israel and Gaza and Lebanon, Syria as well, now with the USA getting involved with the Iran situation, how do you think things are faring up for the Christians in the Middle East generally? You can talk about Syria or any of those other regions.
Thank you so much for having me. You know, with all these conflicts, you know, the Christians, they are minorities in Middle East. And because also the majority of the people who living in the Middle East, they're looking at the Christian down, and they look at them as infidels. And also they look at them as they are spies to Israel or spies to the American. And actually the situation of most Christians who are living in the Middle East is not safe, because they are the easy target for the terrorists and for the, you know, the extremists. And, you know, in their ideology, they're looking at the Christian, they are second-class citizen in all Middle East. You know, the Christian, they're not practicing their freedom like any other majority in the countries. And recently we heard about the bombing of the Syrian church, you know, 25 people killed, 62 people injured. And this is not the government who did it, it's just only terrorist people who's been fed in their mind, the Christian, they are bad, and they go to the peaceful church worshiping and to exploit themselves and to become suicidal. You see how much they can recruit these people to do that evil work. And it's not, even if the government wants to do good things, but they can't control the people because they can't control the ideology they have in their mind. And that's what the all Christian in Middle East, they're facing all of this persecution day by day. They threaten to go to go to churches now. They're not having their ways of doing their jobs or to be part of the government or part of anything. That is a suffer. That is really, it is what they are facing. Basically, Christianity is very difficult to live in Middle East, in the whole and total of Middle East. There are some countries it's more easier or more tougher, but usually overall Christianity in Middle East is struggling. And only things they asking, can you guarantee our safety? They want to stay in their home country, they want to stay in their towns, but they can't, because most of the threats come from everywhere, from their neighbors, from the government sometimes, who doesn't let them do or worship freely in that countries. Also, I would like to share about Iran itself, as we knowing what is going on. We run like every 2 months, we run conferences and training courses in Kurdistan, and we bring people from Iran to come to attend these courses. We have church planters, and now all our people now who's going there, really they are boldly, we baptize people every month, but they go and share the gospel in Iran. But these people, they are forbidden to do any worship, open worship, or they are under risk, they are under threat. But by the grace of God, we see the most growing church in the whole of the Middle East or neighboring country is in Iran. Even they facing all of this persecution, and some of them, I can tell you hundreds of stories about how people they being persecuted and being stabbed, being in a prison, being hitting them. And they've been kicked out from their families, but still is the most growing church, even spite with all this persecution.
I think statistically it's said that it's the fastest growing church in the whole world, so it's a bit faster than China in numbers these days. But generally, I remember when we talked about Iraq, you said something along the lines that a lot of the Christians are just emigrating or leaving because of the threats. Do you think it's a general thing in the Middle East? Is the Christian population going smaller?
Yes, I think that is what we're seeing. From 2 million people, they were living in Iraq. Now we only have a couple of 100,000 in the whole of Iraq as Christians. And from that, we only have like 5% of these people as evangelicals. Now, as there's a rise of evangelical and new believers who come to Christ, from the born-again Christian, we're seeing God is taking many people, they come and they rise up of the numbers. But we think from the traditional Christians, the numbers going down because most of the people, they leave the countries and they try to find safety in other countries.
So are they leaving to go into Europe, America, or are they going to other Middle East nations?
They try to go to Europe, to America, to UK, to everywhere, but it's not easy. I just was reading this morning about how many Syrian Christian refugees we have here in the UK. The ones who came legally, only 11. Since 2016 till today, only 11 people who are coming here. To USA, only 92 people who came. It's like there's a lot of, there's a lot of help to other minorities or other religion,
but not the Christian.
The majority, but not the Christian. The Christian, even they don't see in the open door for them in the West to allowing them. Maybe they go to Lebanon, go to Jordan. Maybe it's more safer for them, or they come to Kurdistan where we are, which is easy for them. But they would like to go somewhere in Europe or the Western countries, but the door is not open for them. And we feel with them because we want them to stay. We want the Christianity to stay and to be existent. But there is no safety, no guarantee, and there's no work. And most of them, they lost half of their families, neighbors, friends. They are not exist anymore.
I'm so excited to hear about the training you're doing with the Iranians, and I'm sure we will do another program on Iran specifically, and maybe if you're here in the country, we'll get you in again. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I've really enjoyed this session with you, learning so much more about the Middle East generally, and bless you. We'll be praying, and I know our people will be praying for your ministry to continue to flourish and be fruitful throughout the Middle East area. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for your prayers.
Viewers must remember that Iran is a theocratic regime, and so many of the other nations that our brother Jamal was speaking of just there find themselves in the same situation. So please pray for Jamal and for his very important initiative and the ongoing work of so many in what are truly dangerous places, where there's an abundance of risk, not just from the state itself, but also from other bad actors and other individuals. Things can be very tribal in these regions, so maybe you may have approval from some to carry out some works of charity, but when it comes to realization that, oh, this person's a Christian, this person follows Jesus, that can lead to severe repercussions and reprisals as well. Christians, especially converts from Islam, already face extreme restriction and opposition across Iran, with the country coming in at number 9 on the World Watch list produced by Open Doors in 2025.
Yeah, it's very much, it's always high in the list of dangerous places for Christians to exist, and that's why it's amazing. It's God. It can only be a miracle of God when you hear about the amount of underground Christianity developing in Iran, specifically there. I mean, Iran is one of those. I mean, we've talked about many Islamic nations before, where in theory they have freedom of religion or freedom of practice of religion, but in Iran it's not so. Since 1979, since the takeover and when the Persian people were removed and the radical Islamic force regime came in, there isn't any freedom for Christianity, and basically there's so many figures of sad cases of people being just disappearing from society.
Yeah, and this is a routine, the disappearing element of it. Also public executions as well on multiple occasions. There's Open Doors has long supported Iranian Christians outside of the country, but even that is being disrupted by the current ongoing situation, which seems to be experiencing some reprieve, but this, I think, is a tenuous ceasefire at best. We could very soon, very swiftly see some other problems. One local partner, Mehdi, has said concerning what's been going on in recent days that we had a powerful and blessed training for Iran's Persecuted Church, thanks to Open Doors support, but on the final day, as attendees prepared to return home, flights were suddenly canceled. Fearful for families back in Iran, with no end to the war in sight at that time, they were now trying to return by bus. Please pray for their safety, and the blood of the Lamb will cover them on their journey. Please pray for an end to the devastating situation, with some of the immediate feedback that was there. So these are individuals who are really, unfortunately, caught between a rock and a hard place here. Most Iranian Christians, all Iranian Christians I've met, would have no problem saying they pray for and desire the overthrow of the Ayatollah and the evil theocracy of the Islamic regime there in Iran. At the same time, there's concern for their own immediate local communities and families. Most would be very friendly to and recognize the support of Israel for the Iranian people over the year, and the offer, even in recent years when there's been droughts and famine, offer of help for the Iranian people in relation to water from even the Israeli Prime Minister. But that there's difficulty because any indication, any open indication of being ill at ease or dissatisfied with the current state of affairs could bring about very harsh reprisals.
They disappear, don't they? They just disappear if they are in any way against the state mindset. But you know, the exciting thing, because I know Jamal well, and talking to him at other times apart from in the interview, and I know of another ministry also that trains up Iranian Christians who get saved, come out of the country to be trained up and equipped, but they all want to go back. They don't think, okay, I've come into a safe place, I'm going to stay in Europe, or I'm going to stay in Kurdistan or wherever it is. They want to be trained to go back stronger in their faith in order to continue to, they've got to be wise. They can't openly proclaim their Christianity because they would. I mean, the figures that we have of the numbers of people who are executed, for a start, it's one of the few nations where executions are rife against Christians or people who are against their state thinking, and imprisonments. I mean, you know, it's just frightening. And I think that's one of the important things that we need to be doing. We need to be praying for these Christians who are strong in their faith, and if they do, when they do go back, when they're able to come back, that they are surrounded by angelic forces. They are, they're literally in the shadow of the Almighty, so that they can continue to bring out or take out the gospel, because it is moving, particularly amongst young people who are watching things online and getting the gospel through various sources. And there is so much anti the regime in Iran. I mean, they're being enforced to be silent, but as soon as things start to move and you start to move the top men, I think we're going to see a radical change in the land of Iran. I think we'll be all shocked and surprised in a good way as to what God is doing in that nation.
Absolutely. There has been a surge in arrests and sentences in the past year, which has challenges with a dramatic rise in sentencing. In 2024 alone, 96 Christians received a combined 263 years in prison, over 6 times more than in 2023, when it was 22 Christians with 43 years total. 5 received 10-year jail terms. 1 was sentenced to 15 years, and I know of some cases where people have been executed as well, particularly if they are proselytizing, if they are speaking of Jesus to other Muslims. And indeed, it is Muslim background converts who face the most severe persecution. They're often given long-term prison sentences, tortured, forced recantations, banned from any legal recourse, held in isolation, and sometimes executed as well. But there's a problem that it's called the tip of the iceberg, January 2025, a joint report by Article 18 CSW Open Doors Middle East Concern, which highlights a 6-fold increase in sentences and broad repression. And there's been waves of arrests, Bible confiscations, and ongoing intimidation tactics. So the situation for Iranian believers is very, very severe and is very, very bleak, and it's our responsibility and honor and privilege really to pray for these individuals, that God would break into their situation, break into their lives. What's fascinating on the back of what you were saying there, Alistair, there's definitely a movement of people coming to faith. If you look at the graphics, and the Iranian regime wants to say we're 99% Shia Muslim, right? That's the common figure, but it's completely false. And there's external sources that are much more objective, that have done research and polling and have found a much more interesting portrayal of the beliefs of people when expressed honestly, that actually only about 32% of individuals in Iran identify as Shia Muslim. And there's only about 5% who identify as Sunni. You have a small percentage who identify as Sufi as well. But the vast majority identify as none, as holding to nothing in particular, or unwilling to share about it. And so one wonders if those who identify as belonging to none are, in some cases, or if they say they don't hold to a religion, maybe some of those are believers, maybe some of those are followers of Jesus, and they have some loophole in their mind as in how they take the poll. There are a number who do identify openly as Christians, but the significant number of those who identify as none, agnostic or atheist, indicates that this is a place where people are very disillusioned with the state of affairs as it is, and are hungry for and seeking truth.
Yeah, well, they've been living under a regime which controls by force, by violence, any sort of any free thinking, and yet they are very educated people, the Persians, over so many decades, centuries as well. But they realize the problem they have is that you can be accused of something, and once you're accused, that's more or less it. You will not get a fair trial. You can be put in prison. And even you were talking about the recent facts about the amount of Christians who are being imprisoned at the moment and given 493 years in total of sentences. But even we've seen it in the recent history of Iran. When it comes towards the end of their sentence, they're not released. They then get accused for something else, and then they remain in prison. So it's so important for us to be praying for those who, I mean, the ones who are in prison. They're there because they've been professing their faith. They've been sharing the gospel. They haven't been coming against the Islamic religion. They're just talking about an alternative faith which offers peace and joy and all those things that Christianity stands for. So they're in prison because somehow they've been accused of something. Maybe they haven't even been, it's not even truth. But we need to really pray that with this, what's going on at the moment, the regime change comes and the Christians are released to practice their faith and even have the freedom to live a life which is normal. But it needs a miracle, and we're seeing, if you're watching the news of the last few days and weeks, things are changing radically in Iran, and there's this ceasefire at the moment, but how long is that going to last before things kick off again? There's certainly very different messages coming from the Ayatollah and those in the regime than it's coming from Israel and USA and the Western areas. So we need to be praying. We need to be praying so much for Christianity to spread, because that's what it's all about. The gospel has to be preached in all the world as a witness to the nations, including Iran, and then the end will come. Matthew 24:14.
Absolutely. There are some specific stories that are good to highlight just to personalize this. You know, these are individuals who they have names. You know, they're real people. 24 years has been given to two converts in Tabriz, Mehdi Rahimi, 49 years of age, and Kia Norinia, 56, were each sentenced to 12 years in prison, 15 years civil rights ban, plus fines equivalent to confiscated Christian literature. The charges were promoting deviant Zionist Christian beliefs. They got 10 years for that. Smuggling prohibited Christian books also saw them receive 2 years. And their trials occurred in April, held in absentia without any defense rights. March 2025, over 41 years given out to 3 Tehran converts. Abbas Souri, 48, sentenced to 15 years in prison, plus 15-year rights ban, plus civil fines. Mirtad Shamlui, 37 years of age, total of around 10 years, plus fines, plus restrictions. Narges Nasseri, 37, also pregnant, sentenced to 11 years plus a 15-year ban on civil rights. It's just abhorrent. Fines, travel ban, and forced relocation. And these were arrested on the 1st of November of 2024. They were convicted on February the 13th for running a house church and propaganda against the regime. But this is New Testament type stuff, you know, where we see it was always you're upsetting the locals, you're turning people against the government, you're turning the world upside down, you're disrupting, and you're urging people to go against the law.
Yeah, it's the book of Acts in the present day, and it certainly makes me very, very appreciative of having a relevant or relative freedom to practice our faith in this country. And you know, I'm inspired when I hear of these people in Iran, in other nations like Syria and so on, where they are so, they come under false accusation and they can disappear from society. We've seen that in other nations, in Yemen and so on too. But we need to pray that they keep bold, just as it was in the book of Acts, you know, that the Spirit of the Lord comes upon them again and again and again as much as they need, so that they continue to receive that shaking, like even the house where they were in was shaken in the book of Acts. But for these people, that they would be strong in the Lord and the power of His might. That's Ephesians 6 verse 10. And they need support. They need encouragement. They need they need us as the viewers to be aware and alert to what's going on. I mean, I think with Iran, people are more aware than most places, but we need to be alert to be intercessors and standing in the gap, because prayer works. You know, I know this is my mantra in so many ways. When we pray, God hears, God answers. His ears are not too heavy that he cannot hear the cries of the people. But we need to be standing with our Iranian brothers and sisters, but also challenging the regime which is trying to shut them down. So it's an important time for us to be really praying.
Absolutely, and to remember friends like Jamal who are actively involved across the Middle East in seeking to proclaim the truth and in seeking to show the light and love of Jesus to all who are there, to all who will hear and to all who will receive. I'm looking forward to the day when this regime will fall, when the Ayatollah will be no more, and when there'll be the ability for believers to openly declare the excellencies of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Hoping one day maybe Alistair, you and I will be able to go to Iran and see all that God has been doing and is doing there. We remember that after the USSR fell, there were so many believers who had come to faith in that season. God can do the same again and topple the Iranian regime and enable there to be freedom. God bless you. Continue to pray for the persecuted church in Iran.